This edition of MacVoices is supported by the MacVoices Dispatch, our weekly newsletter for MacVoices viewers and listeners. Get the inside scoop on all the MacVoices news by visiting macvoices.com/newsletter to subscribe. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, we have Mr. Jeff Carlson with us back this time. Jeff, it's great to have you. Thanks for being here.
Oh, I'm so glad to be on again.
It's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure. And I'm going to just say one word, and then I'm going to turn you loose, and we'll do a little free association. And the magic word is...
Kaiser Soze?
What?
No.
What?
Sorry.
Don't even know what that is.
A movie reference. Never mind.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Go ahead.
The word is Adobe.
Adobe. Yes, I've heard of them.
I thought so. They seem to be making a lot of news in the last week or so. And I figured you might be a good guy to talk a little bit about it and let us know what has happened, because there seems to be, shall we say, a little bit of angst over some of the announcements.
A little bit of angst, yeah. So this little company called Adobe, they make a few products you've probably heard of. I can't talk to everything that they release because they do quite a bit. But basically, last week was Adobe MAX. And that's basically where that's their big event where they showcase usually new versions of software and sometimes show off like technology previews of things they're working on. Like, it's a giant Adobe design love fest. I've never been. It looks like a lot of fun. And as part of this, they typically release new versions of say Photoshop and InDesign and Illustrator, and they did that this year. And in general, what happens is those updates are either sort of minor, or they're like a few new features that get added that a few people really like. At least in the past, like I want to say 4 or 5 years, we haven't had like a real giant brand new announcement or brand new news. That's Adobe has done very well with having their product matrix. Since most of it is done on subscription, almost everybody is going to get the new version. So it's not like the days of old where you came out with a big like a new Photoshop every 2 years or something, and so you had to roll a whole bunch of stuff into it. So this year, one of the big news items was Adobe Lightroom. Adobe Photoshop Lightroom. I say that because naming turns out to be an interesting issue. Lightroom, for people who don't know, is Adobe's software for managing your photo library, editing it using a lot of the core technologies that are also used in Photoshop, and it's used by professional and amateur photographers everywhere. So before this happened, people who subscribed to one of Adobe's Creative Cloud plans, they had Adobe Photoshop Lightroom CC. CC meaning Creative Cloud, and it's a 10-year program. It's very mature. It has lots and lots of features, and this year Adobe announced a brand new Lightroom, completely separate, and they called it Adobe Lightroom CC. Actually, I think it's still technically Adobe Photoshop Lightroom CC because you got to get the branding in. And so it's sort of silly, but I'm sure that there's a business case for it. So, but Lightroom CC is a brand new, completely written from scratch version of Lightroom. And what used to be called Lightroom CC is now called Lightroom Classic CC. So remember those names. See, because there's already like a little bit of confusion, and I think part of the newsworthiness of all of this is not just that they've split Lightroom, but they've given them these sort of confusing names that point to possible intentions. So I will break this down. Lightroom Classic, we'll start with that, is basically the desktop workflow. It's what most photographers use now. It is very much designed for storing all your files on hard drives and organizing them and printing with it. And my book, Take Control of Your Digital Photos, deals a lot with Lightroom and how to sort of manage that whole mess of all of your digital photos. What do you do with them? How do you find them? Edit them, etc.
Can I
go ahead? Jump in.
Yeah, just one thing, just to help everyone understand it and maybe give some frames of reference. Is the desktop version of Lightroom, is it fair to say it's comparable to Apple's Photos from the organization and core technology editing standpoint?
That is an excellent question. Yes, but I'm going to put an asterisk.
Yeah, I hear a but coming.
Because so is Lightroom CC.
Okay.
But for right now, yes.
Okay. I don't want to take you too much off topic, but I just want to make sure we have our hands around it.
That's actually very much on topic.
Okay.
So it's basically the idea is, like this is the place that you store all your photos. There are other ways to do your photos. Like you could just put them in folders on your hard drive, and then you have to do a lot of manual work to keep track of it all. And so like Apple's Photos, Lightroom is like this big container that also has editing features. So the good news about Lightroom Classic is that it's faster than the last version. For photographers who've been using Lightroom Lightroom before it was called Classic, performance has been a bottleneck in the last couple of years, and so Adobe they did a lot of work to speed things up, which is great. And there are a couple of new features, but mostly it's a performance update, which is great news. So then, so that's Classic. Now Lightroom CC, like I said, it's completely designed from the ground up. And it's very much Adobe saying, okay, this is what the future of dealing with your photos, dealing with your digital photos. This is how we see the future, and it also looks a lot like Photos. Apple Photos, and also like say Google Photos, because Lightroom CC is very much like a cloud-centric version of Lightroom. Just as, Apple got rid of Aperture and iPhoto because they were sort of built on legacy code, and they built Photos in order to have it plugged directly into iCloud and iCloud Photo Library and make sure that you have all of your photos up to date on your iPhone and your iPad and other Macs and all of that. Lightroom CC has the same goal in mind, because there are more people who are taking photos with phones. There are more people who are using phones and tablets and mobile devices to store and work with their images. We have our laptops these days actually have less storage than they used to, because a lot of it is solid state storage. So you'll get like a MacBook Pro that has 256 gigs of photos. Well, most photographers can't keep their entire photo library on that. So what do you do about it? And so what Lightroom CC does, it's designed so that it's talking to Creative Cloud, and that's a core component, a core reason for it to exist. With me so far?
I think so. I mean, I'm a little bit familiar with Lightroom. Mm-hmm. I'm not a Lightroom user, but I understand the concept, and it did seem like for a while that Adobe was really pushing you, whether you were using the Creative Cloud or even if you were using the consumer level Photoshop Elements,
right?
And photo. Let's see, what is it? Elements Premiere or Premiere Elements, the
Premiere
video
Elements,
edit,
the video one.
Trying to get you to use and organize everything in Lightroom.
Yeah. I mean, the Lightroom, it has great organizing capabilities, and with Classic, with the old version, it's something where you can just sort of bring all that stuff in, but it was a little difficult to bring in, like, let's say your iPhone photos, which sort of automatically come into Apple Photos, and then you have to find a way to import them, and you sort of end up having this like fragmented situation where you might have separate catalogs and separate imports and things like that. And so what Lightroom CC does is its whole approach is, look, we want to be a lot simpler with all of this because people in general, they're not tagging their photos. They are like not wanting to deal with complexity. And so Lightroom CC basically says, okay, this is where your entire photo library is going to live. And for people who currently use Classic, we can get back to that in a second. And so when you import your photos into Lightroom CC, everything gets copied up to Creative Cloud. And there, by having everything basically up in the cloud, then all of your devices, so let's say you're running Lightroom Mobile on an iPhone and an iPad and on your laptop, and you have Lightroom CC on your laptop, and you also have Lightroom CC on your iMac at home. You don't have to worry about synchronizing all that stuff because it just happens. Like, it all goes up to the cloud and distributes through all the devices. And whenever you make an edit on one, the edit shows up on all the others. It's a very, very much like a simplified model. So that's kind of like the core philosophy behind it. And it's worth noting that because Lightroom CC is a 1.0, it feels very stripped down. It sort of is stripped down. For one, because it's a 1.0, it doesn't have all the features of Classic. Some things that are missing are it doesn't print, which if you print photos, that can be a big deal. It doesn't have of course, I'm blanking it out now. I wrote an article for DP Review that sort of breaks down a lot of this. And what was interesting about that, not to get too off topic, is that the people who read the article and commented, and the dpreview.com has a readership that is very vociferous, let's say that. They like to comment frequently and often, and it's a very feisty community. And so they here it is. Okay, I was basically stalling so I could bring up this list here.
I love the way you confess it later.
yeah, exactly. I would like to say that was all planned, but I had just forgotten to open it. But see, what's interesting, and I think what viewers and listeners might be thinking right now is, like, why? Like why is Adobe doing all this, and what are the differences? So I will jump to a few of the things that CC is missing again. So it can't print. There are no web or book modules. These are things that like you could create a website basically of a bunch of photos and then upload that to a server, or you could build a book that would then get sent out for printing. It doesn't have that. It doesn't have sort of more advanced things like tethered capture, which is where your camera is actually connected via a cable to your computer and shots just go directly into Lightroom. There are things like color labels are gone. So when you are organizing your photos, you can do it with star ratings, or you can like set something as a pick or a reject, which it's sort of like what Photos does now, where you can either say something is a favorite or nothing. And Lightroom has always had like another level of color labels so that you could, group things however you like. And you could say, okay, show me all of the 3-star, green labeled photos and, in order for you to find what you're looking for. So that's all gone. So right now, it is very much not a professional tool. And I think a lot of the hullabaloo, and in fact, one of the reasons why we're talking, because a lot of people who are invested in Lightroom see this and they were like, okay, well, this looks like a cute little toy, but I'm not going to use this. It doesn't have these other features. So why is Adobe even bothering? Okay. So, what that points to is the fact that Adobe, Adobe knows that, and I should point out they've been very vocal and very upfront about saying, Lightroom Classic is not going away. We are developing it like there are 2 separate teams, they've said, and so even though it has that name Classic, which sort of sounds like, oh, that's on the way out. Which I think a lot of people are also responding to. What Adobe has said, and what can I say? What I know of from a few contacts inside Adobe, I'm not giving anything away here, is that they're not like fast tracking Classic to go away, because they know that right now they have this very sizable base of users who are using Classic and use a lot of those features. And if they were to just get rid of that and say, here's this shiny new thing, it doesn't do everything you want, but oh well, like that would be terrible. So so where am I? How are we doing? Have I gone into the weeds too far?
No. We're doing good. And I think what's interesting is that if we edited this show, took out the words Adobe Lightroom and inserted Final Cut 10, I think the story would sound very similar. So, and I'm not justifying what Adobe's doing, because I can't because I just don't have any frame of reference. But right. It does feel like that there's some of these companies, Apple included, they're and well, no, not Microsoft, but Apple, Adobe, they're going back and they're kind of rewriting from the ground up things to make them more modern, a little more accessible, definitely for the newer modern hardware, but definitely with some of the cloud features as in the forefront. And that just, I'm sorry, it takes time, and I'm sure they'll be rolling out those features as quickly as they can, because they had to know that some of this backlash was coming.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm a little surprised that the naming. I keep bringing up the naming, but I think a lot of people are sort of hung up on it because, it like Classic does make it sound like, okay, this is the old thing, and now we have the new thing. Whereas, like in reality, at least for the foreseeable future, you're going to have some people who are going to, just stick with Classic, because it does exactly what they need it to do. It has all, the advanced features that some of them take advantage of. It supports like third-party plugins, like different companies that do specific things, like really good black and white conversions, things like that. That's not something that Lightroom CC does right now. And so, they are looking at this and thinking, okay, like at any minute, Adobe's just going to say, well, we don't really care about our current users because we're going to go chase, the future. And I think part of that actually is because of Apple and Final Cut and iPhoto and things like that, because, Apple has never been afraid to say, yeah, we're moving forward, and if you don't want to come with us, that's okay, because we know you probably will eventually. And so, there are still people who are really upset that Aperture is gone, because Aperture was a good product that just withered on the vine, and it didn't get the attention that it probably should have. So what's interesting about all of this is that I think it's safe to say that at some point in the future, let's say 5 years or something, Lightroom CC will probably have either comparable features as Classic, or it'll be streamlined, or features that people that a majority of people still really need. I'm sorry, still really use, will be worked into the new program, and then Classic may go away, or may be sidelined or something. Right now, CC, again, it's a 1.0 product, and so there are just some things that it doesn't do yet. But what it does do is actually really interesting, because, not to get too much into the architecture of it all, but I can say, after using it for a while, it's really fast. People who have been using Classic, and you import photos, and you get up and you go get a cup of coffee, or you come back, and you just sort of expect that that's going to take a long time. That's not the case. It's really fast. It's really responsive. They can do that because they've engineered it from scratch, and that's a very cool thing. It's also, I think, because of the way that they've designed it, they're very much targeting new users. They want the people who are on their phones all the time. They want people who whose mindset is not, okay, I need to go and sit down in my home office, or on my living room table, or something like that, and and go and process my photos, because I think that there's a core number of people who do that, but there's also a huge number of people that don't. And so Adobe obviously wants to get the biggest audience it can, and it needs to compete with Google Photos and Apple Photos. And Apple has such a tremendous advantage by being on all of the devices it sells. So it's Lightroom CC is simpler, partially because it's brand new, but also partially by design. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think a lot of people will really go for that, because I would imagine that there are a lot of people, sort of like with Photoshop. There are a lot of people who think, okay, I want to do something with my pictures, I need Photoshop. Well, they don't need Photoshop. Like Photoshop is like a steam engine when they're looking for a fork, but they don't know. And so they go and they get Photoshop, and they open it up, and are probably, really lost, and give up. And I think there's a little bit of that with Lightroom too, because people will be like, oh, well, you know what you need is Lightroom. Like, Photos is good. Photos is fine. It's kind of a toy. That I don't believe that, but a lot of people think that. And if you want to be like a real serious enthusiast photographer, you need Lightroom. And so they go and they get Lightroom, and they open it up, and there's still like a whole bunch of panels and boxes and options and things like that, and it scares people off.
Okay, so I'm with you on one big thing. I think all of us, no, not all of us, but a lot of us want to believe that we need the professional level tools, and the professional level hardware, and the professional level software. And at the end of the day, you're right. I think you said steam engine and fork. I mean, that's a perfect perfect thing. I mean, everybody's so upset about the Mac Pro, and yet there's such a small percentage of people that really need a Mac Pro. But that's a whole nother discussion.
Right.
Where I think this gets a little confusing for a lot of us, though, is, well, first of all, I will chastise Adobe for they create the Photoshop standard, if you will, the file format and everything, and then they make it inaccessible. And at times it feels like they're pricing their products out beyond the range of people. And so that basically, kind of really does hamstring you. But more importantly, I feel like that I'm confused over, okay, so I've got Photoshop Elements that does what it does. Now I've got this new version of Lightroom that is not as fully featured as the classic version of Lightroom, but maybe a little more suited for today's thinking and today's devices. Then I've got the other Lightroom. So I mean, okay, so if I'm a pro, if I'm a casual user, and we'll get into pricing sooner or later, but how do I decide what I want, and what do I want? What should I want?
No, that is like one of the key questions. And I think before I answer that, I think part of the issue is, Adobe had to jump in somewhere. I think, in an ideal world, they would have made Lightroom CC, and it would have all the features of Lightroom Classic. And it would be like, here's the brand new Lightroom, and it's much faster, and it's really cool, and we're just replacing it with the old one, and you're not going to really notice it except that it's better. But, software development doesn't work that way. And so, I think what basically happened is they said, okay, we need to plant a flag. We're going to get something out there, and take off from there, which was actually sort of how Lightroom began in the first place. The very first version of Lightroom, like, you couldn't even crop an image, and they very quickly and very aggressively, added features and built it up. And so I suspect that there's going to be a parallel with that with Lightroom CC. So here's how the landscape works right now. If you are a pro and you currently use Lightroom Classic, you probably want to keep using that, because like you have a workflow, you already have plugins and presets and things like that, like that all works together for you. Lightroom CC you can get for free, because it'll be part of the subscription plans. Use that off to the side and kick the tires a bit. See what you like about it. See what you don't like about it. There are ways to synchronize photos between them, so they can work together. So it's a good way to give it a try and sort of get a glimpse into the future. And if there's something about it that you really like, I know I've heard some photographers say, I really love that it syncs with the cloud, because I'm doing a lot more stuff mobile and remote, and I don't want to carry a laptop anymore. I just want to carry an iPad. I've heard that from photographers, and so they might be like, okay, this could be the thing that I use. I would say that for someone who is not invested in Lightroom already, who does not already have catalogs and libraries, Lightroom CC is a really good way to jump in. I was on a photo workshop that I co-led while these announcements were happening, and one of the participants was a woman who, she kind of knew her way around cameras, but she was new to a lot of the the processing and all of that. And when I did a demo of Classic versus Lightroom CC, she immediately gravitated to CC, because she didn't need to build websites and create books, and she doesn't need to print, or if she does need to print, that there are other ways to do it. And so I think Lightroom CC really works well for the enthusiast who is not already in the sort of Lightroom ecosystem, especially if they want to be able to use Lightroom on an iPad or an iPhone. The way I've been using it recently, in fact, like I all the shots that I took during this workshop, I ran through Lightroom CC, and so I've been trying to use it, as exclusively as I can. And what's nice about it is that with everything going up to Creative Cloud and then syncing back down to my iPad, I've been able to work on things, review photos, edit photos, on an iPad on my couch in the living room. I don't have to be upstairs, at my desk and all of that. That's something that I've sort of talked about for quite a while, writing my iPad for Photographer's book and all of that. And this really takes a lot of the stress points out, like it takes a lot of the friction away from doing that. There's also sort of on the side, Adobe also is offering a plan that's just Lightroom Mobile. And the mobile versions are very much like Lightroom CC in terms of interface and simplicity. There are a few features that the mobile apps don't have that CC does, but in terms of the experience of using them, it's very similar. So there are going to be people who are like, you know what, I just shoot everything with my phone. I can use the Lightroom app on my phone to shoot raw images and take advantage of the better technology that's come up in the phone shooting world, and still have Lightroom's processing engine and some of those features that are not in, say, like the built-in Photos app. So I think that right now that Adobe is doing a good job of sort of widening that spectrum of people, widening the spectrum of people who are interested in photography, who want to get into using something like Lightroom without running into that wall of, oh, but geez, I'm importing my photos into Lightroom Classic, and there are like 6 windows and like different options. Do I want to copy this to another directory? Do I want to add keywords? Do I want to, all of those sorts of things.
All of the Adobe things. I mean, Adobe always has been a little bit palette happy. Let's face it.
Yeah. And I mean, it makes sense because they've always catered to a very pro market, and I think. I don't think Adobe is in any trouble whatsoever. It seems like they're doing quite well. But I think any company wants to reach more customers. They want to, expand their base so that, Google, which does most of this stuff for free, doesn't, take away their customers and all of that. So, yeah.
It's interesting to compare the three. Apple has the Photos is on every iDevice and every Mac that ships. Mm-hmm. Google isn't, but it's free. And of course, there are issues that we could go down a rabbit hole on that one too.
Right.
Adobe wants to be paid for pretty much everything, and yet they are trying to command that top tier price. And probably cater principally to professionals, but also I give them credit. I think they're recognizing that, at some point they're going to have to be attracting younger customers as their older customers just frankly die out. That's just part of perpetuating your business.
Right.
So 3 very different models and trying to figure out what the current customers want, what the up and coming customers want. Mm-hmm. So in some ways I could condemn them, in some ways I applaud them. I do see, as I said, a lot of similarities with Final Cut. That you got to plant your flag somewhere, as you said, and then start to build from there. So, but Jeff, talk a little bit if you can, and I know that you probably don't have a pricing matrix there, but when it comes to, do you really? Great, then that's even better.
I brought it up because I knew that we wanted to look at it.
Yeah, we got to get to that at some point because, we have subscription software here, and we know how some people feel about that.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, it's still dollars out of your pocket, whether you're an enthusiast, a casual, or a professional. So where does pricing fit into all the questions?
Well, it's interesting because looking back at the article that I wrote for DP Review and all the comments, a huge number of people, and we're talking like last I saw it was like 994 comments. I mean, it's crazy. A lot of the people just simply don't like a subscription model, and I get it. Like I understand that, like, for some people, there's the whole issue of owning software and renting software and all of that. Surprisingly, and I know I'm going to sound like a total Adobe apologist. I wrote a blog post about this a few days ago. Surprisingly, Adobe's offerings are not as expensive as some people think. When you compare it to like other similar tools. So here's how it breaks down. So right now, to get Lightroom, 2 weeks ago, to get Lightroom, you could either do like the full Adobe Creative Suite, like it's called the All Apps plan, and that's basically like you spend I think it's $50 a month, and you get everything, InDesign, Photoshop, like the whole thing. Apps you've probably never heard of before, you can download and use. It's kind of crazy. So Lightroom CC is included in that because it's all of that. It's $50 a month, and you get 100 gigs of cloud storage. So I think a lot of people who have been using Lightroom, they are on the it's called just the I think Creative Cloud Photography plan, which is $10 a month, and before that would get you Lightroom and Photoshop, and now you get Lightroom and Photoshop and Lightroom CC still for the $10 a month, and you get 20 gigabytes of cloud storage, which isn't very much. So you can increase the cloud storage to 1 terabyte for an extra $10 a month. So $20 a month gets you Photoshop, Lightroom Classic, and Lightroom CC, and a terabyte of storage. Now, the storage is important because everything that goes into Lightroom CC goes up to the cloud. So, in a way, part of this is you're paying for a cloud storage plan. And that's something that I know that a lot of people are like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, I can buy a hard drive, like a giant hard drive, for that amount of money that I spend per year of that. But, it's Adobe system. It's made to work with Creative Cloud. So there's that. People who are existing photography plan customers can get it for $15 a month for the first year. So they're helping ease that transition, I think, for 1 terabyte. So it's photography plan. You get the photography plan. There's also just a Lightroom CC plan where you get just Lightroom CC, 1 terabyte of cloud storage, and that's $10 a month. So that's for people who are like, hey, this new thing seems like the thing for me, and 1 terabyte will give me plenty of room to store things up in the cloud. And then lastly, there's a $5 a month Lightroom mobile plan, and that lets you use Lightroom mobile on as many devices as you want, just not the desktop software. And the Lightroom mobile is it's free to use, but there are some things like the cloud syncing that you have to have a Creative Cloud plan for. So that's what that covers. So Okay, that's the first part.
That's the first part. Okay, keep on.
That's the first part. I know. It's complicated.
Well,
So
okay, so I'll ask the question in the middle, and then
go ahead.
we'll get to the second. But
Yeah.
is Adobe doing a Microsoft here, where they're making the product the matrix and the pricing matrix so blasted complex that, and I'm thinking more about Windows. Do you get Windows Student or Windows Surface or Windows Desktop or Windows 365 or Windows 2012 or Windows Australia? I mean, what? And so here, I mean, and you say the first part, and it's like, oh my God, I think I had a pretty good beat on it. Then you said that, and it just kind of blew me away. So there's more.
Sorry. Well, the more part is like the part and a third maybe, which is basically you can pay more for higher storage tiers. So like an extra $20 a month gets you 2 terabytes, an extra $50 a month gets you 5 terabytes, an extra $100 a month gets you 10 terabytes of storage. So if you need 10 terabytes of photo storage, you're probably in a position where you can spend, $120 a month, for all of this. Sorry, there's one more thing. Not a Steve Jobs one more thing. Okay. But so up until now, there's also been a standalone version of Lightroom that's not tied to any subscription tier. You pay $150 and you get it, and that's it. And that's Lightroom 6. So what's shipping now, Lightroom Classic is technically Lightroom 7. And so Lightroom 6 is like last year's version. It doesn't have all the same features as Lightroom CC, but it has like the core stuff. And so they're still selling that. However, it's not going to be supported after the end of this year. So it'll still work, hopefully, but they won't do any more bug fixes, and they won't do any more camera compatibility updates. So that's the other piece. And for people who have been using Lightroom and do not like the subscription models, that's what they've been using, and they're all terribly angry about this. But I would say it. The subscription model, like the CC model, is clearly working for Adobe, and it's one of those things where you probably have like a very small number of people doing the standalone, and an increasing number of people who are paying for the subscription. What's interesting is a lot of people are saying, okay, well, that's it. I'm done with Adobe. I'm going to go use Capture One Pro. A company called Phase One uses Capture One Pro, which also does editing and library management and all of that. It's a pretty good application. I reviewed version 8 a couple of years ago for Macworld, and mostly liked it. I had some quibbles, but it's a good thing. So this blog post that I wrote earlier this week was basically saying, okay, well, let's look at the numbers. Capture One Pro costs $300 to buy it outright. They also have a subscription model for it, which is $20 a month. So you buy it, you spend $300 to buy it outright, and then you can upgrade for $100. So, over the course of 2 years, you spend $400. Well, over the course of 2 years doing Creative Cloud, you're spending like $240. So surprisingly, wait, did I get that right?
Which, I mean, I'm not being smart now. Which version of Creative Cloud? The photo plan. Okay.
So,
So I think you're spot on then.
Be careful. There's a writer attempting to do math off the top of his head. This is not acceptable. So that's, if you just have like the bare bones $10 per month photo plan, that's how much that costs. Anyway, so it turns out that Adobe's plans like aren't really way out there in terms of being expensive. It's just a lot of people just don't like the idea that I'm continually paying for them over and over. To answer your question about all the fragmentation, I think what they're doing is not so much Microsoft's approach, which often seems like the I don't know, like buying a car, where it's like, we're going to throw so many different numbers at you, you're going to be thoroughly confused, and you're just going to pick one, and hopefully it'll be one that that costs you more money and gives you less. That's probably not fair, but I will say it anyway, because that's how it feels sometimes.
But,
I think,
and that's, Jeff, that's a key, I think, here is perception. What the reality is may be another matter, but the perception is that it's not even bait and switch. It's just a marketing plan built on confusion. That's the way it feels.
Yeah. And so I would say that what Adobe is doing, like, it is a lot more fragmented than it was, but I think they're trying to hit those different price points that make people feel comfortable. So if $10 a month sounds great, like I can manage my photos for $10 a month. Okay. Then you go with the photography plan. And, if you think that 20 gigabytes of storage, works for the number of photos you take, then great. And if you realize that, oh, you know what, actually, I just bought a Nikon D850 and 20 gigabytes is going to go by in a flash because the files are so darn big, then you'll be like, okay, all right, I'll pay the extra $10 a month to get the terabyte, and then for more professional studios, they would probably go with like the full Creative Cloud suite, and so you have that sort of high end. So I think it's almost more the Apple retail model, where it's like, well, you can get a much better, you can get more iPhone with sorry, not more iPhone. You can get the same iPhone with more storage for not a whole lot more. And then, like going from like 64 to 256 gigs or something like that. And for not a whole lot more money. And so people are like, all right, well, if it's only, $100 more, then I'll just go for that. I think that's the thinking that's happening here. And it's also very much quite honestly, I'm glad that that if you do the photography plan, like, you still have the core, you still have Classic, and you still have Photoshop. You have to remember that Photoshop used to cost $1,000, and it would come out every 2 years, and you could upgrade for $500. So, again, I'm not trying to apologize for Adobe, but like given development costs and all of that stuff, like, this seems reasonable. Whether people are going to go for it, I don't know. I think they are. I mean, what has drawn me to this, and I should point out in full disclosure, I'm currently writing a book about writing Take Control of Lightroom CC, because I like the idea that there could be a lot more people who have discounted Lightroom because it's too big, too complicated. It's more than what they need. And something like Lightroom CC gives them that level of, I can organize my photos, I can edit using better tools than what Photos offers. As an example, like, there are some selection tools, so you can say, all right, I just want the sky in this landscape to be darker, and so you draw a little mask over there and just make that darker, and it's actually very, very easy and simple. That's something that, like, Photos doesn't do. So you have some better tools without having to sort of break out of the ecosystem and say, okay, I'm going to take a photo and I'm going to open it in a third-party application, like, say, Affinity Photo, where like there's no library that goes along with that. And so I edit it, then I have to somehow get it back into my Lightroom library. And like there are definitely ways to do that. And I think most of them are like just enough of a pain in the patookie to be embraced by a lot of people. Whereas now you can be like, oh, you want to edit a Lightroom photo in Lightroom CC. Great. You do that. And in, 10 seconds, the edited version is on your iPhone and you can just share it to Instagram right there. So, that ecosystem tightness, I think, is a boon.
Well, if you're writing a book on this, then that means you'll be back here soon, or at some point, I should say. I don't know about soon, but you'll be back to talk about it, and we'll talk a little more about what Lightroom can, what the versions of Lightroom can and can't do.
Yes.
But I was anxious to have you here because it just seems like this is one of those things that if you are any part of that world, there a lot of things happened with Adobe MAX last week that was like, what's going on over there? It doesn't seem like there's, a bunch of happy people. There are a lot of happy people about some parts of it, but this one seemed to really light people up, and I didn't understand what was going on. I do want to wrap up though with one last thing. It's a little more of a general question, but we kind of know where Apple stands on privacy, and I think, and I will generalize by saying I think most of us feel pretty good about it. I think we know where Google stands on privacy, and that's all that needs to be said there. So where with advocating a cloud-based workflow, where do you think Adobe comes down? Because if I'm editing or working on photos, and everybody's going to say, "Oh, you're working on nudes," well, okay, maybe, but more importantly, let's say I have product shots of a brand new. Of the new Mac Pro that are coming out, and I need to tweak those and work with them. Well, the last thing I want to do is, have them floating up to the cloud and somebody grabbing them and, doing one of the infamous leaks. So where does Adobe stand on privacy, or how comfortable you feel with Adobe managing your cloud and providing that cloud storage?
That is an excellent question. I don't know if I have a good answer. I know that, as far as I know, they're not like, what's a good word for it? Like they're not going to go in and browse your photos for something that they can use in an ad or something like that. I know that part of what they're doing is they've as part of Lightroom CC, it incorporates this new technology called Adobe Sensei, which is basically machine learning, AI, the same kind of things that half of Silicon Valley is working on now, and that lets you do things like search for elk, and all the photos that you have shot that include an elk or something that looks like an elk will come up, and you don't have to do anything to make that happen. So it's that sort of object recognition. And so I believe, but I'm not sure, I need to look into this, that, they are, scanning for objects and using machine learning to identify things on the greater set of photos. But I don't know if that's like how much is that tied to, Chuck's library? I would guess probably not much. It's kind of one of those scale things where, nobody's going to hack into Adobe and steal your image. Like they're going to hack into Adobe and try to steal your credit card number, like that just. I hate to completely advocate a security by obscurity, but I think in practical terms, I don't see a big issue with that. But it's an excellent question. I'm not entirely sure.
It's just one that comes to mind, I guess. Right as we record this, the iPhone 10 launch is very much on both Jeff's mind and my mind, our very sleepy minds, and. I have to wonder, it seems like that is becoming a bigger and bigger thing. The value of some of those images is becoming a bigger and bigger thing. And so if I play in that space, or if I'm a photographer playing in that space, I want to be real sure that I know, and before they were on my computer and my computer alone. So unless somebody came through the window or the door, I could feel pretty good about it. But now my workflow is in the cloud. So
no, that's a fantastic point. Surprisingly, I've not heard many people bringing that up. I think maybe people are just so aggravated that change has happened that they haven't, chased that down. But when we talk again, I'll have an answer because that is an excellent question.
Okay.
Because quite honestly, Adobe, they were hacked, a few years ago, and had credit card information stolen and all of that. So, my gut feeling is, in terms of images, it's playing in a fairly limited sandbox, because the whole point is to make those available to your devices and also make it easier for you to, for example, you could create an album of the best shots you took over the summer and, share that to a website. You can do that now. It actually turns out to be a really easy way to share a group of photos with other people, which has strangely been a difficult thing for people to do. If you have a party and a whole bunch of people are there and you take a bunch of pictures and you want to share it with all of them, you can basically say, share this album and make the images downloadable for those people if you want, without having to specifically invite people. You just give them your URL. And of course it also ties into, if you have your library in the cloud and you go into Photoshop and you want to take, a background landscape that you shot, and then a portrait of somebody, and you want to cut that out and put them on that landscape, because Photoshop is also tied into it all. You can just grab that. You don't have to export and import and move things around. So it seems to me that that's the scale, that's the scope. But I'm not a security researcher, so I would imagine that Rich Mogul, who writes for TidBITS and who is an amazing security researcher, I bet he could probably look at it and go, okay, well there's this and this and this and this that that someone could take advantage of or whatever. So no, excellent question.
Okay.
I will research it because it needs to be in my book.
I'm not angry. I'm just paranoid. So there you go. Jeff, thank you for trying to shed some light on this, on the controversy.
You're welcome. I hope it wasn't just, a giant rambling mess, but
no, I don't. I mean, again, it would have only been a giant rambling mess if you have no interest in it. If you have an interest, then, you need to go through and figure this out and figure out what's happening to your existing workflow, maybe where it's going to be next year, and what it's going to cost you. So.
Yeah, definitely.
So, well, you are absolutely invited back, obviously, when the new book is ready. And if there's anything else that comes up in between, you're also welcome then.
I love being welcome on this show. This is great.
Good. Thanks so much, Jeff. Take care.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. I hope we didn't confuse you. I hope we shed a little light into this, if it's something that you're interested in, because, it is a little crazy. I did want to mention something, though, on the subject of me being paranoid. If you didn't receive any of the notices or tweets or emails, my Twitter account that was hacked is now unhacked. I've got control of it again. So the temporary account I had up is just frozen. It's not going to be used, and probably will eventually go away. So you can follow me at Chuck Joyner. That is a legitimate account. It really is me. And so thank you for your patience, and hopefully we all learned a few lessons there. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes, links to subscribe, and to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, Facebook, YouTube, Vimeo, SoundCloud, the MacVoices blog, the MacVoices Dispatch, our weekly newsletter, and on MacVoices magazine, free on Flipboard that helps you do more with your Apple tech. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.